Welcome back. In the last episode, we looked at the first compositional tool, focal point. This time, we'll be going over the second tool that I like to call the rules of composition. I've identified four main rules, and they are the rule of thirds, the rule of space, the rule of odds, and the golden rule. But before we dive in, remember the saying, rules are made to be broken. But it's important to actually know the rules before you can break them. So let's take a look at what they are and why they matter. The first one is the rule of thirds. This is a simple but effective guide for where to place your focal point and horizon line. Studies show that viewers find off-center compositions more pleasing and dynamic. And this idea actually dates back to the old masters of the Renaissance. Think of it this way. If you divide your canvas into thirds, both vertically and horizontally, those intersecting points make ideal spots for your focal point. And it helps create a composition that feels both balanced and interesting. Now, let's take a look at the painting The Fog Warning by Winslow Homer. Notice how Homer has used the rule of thirds for the placement of the figure, but also for the horizon line. Consequently, the composition feels natural and pleasing, and the viewer's eye is drawn to exactly where the artist wants it to go. When a horizon line or focal point are right in the middle of the canvas, the composition can feel static or even dull. Because when everything's centered, your eye tends to stop right there instead of moving around the painting. So when you're analyzing or creating art, always take note of where the horizon and focal points sit. Here's another example, Claude Monet's The Cliff Walk at Pourville. The horizon line sits high in the piece, near the upper third, and the two figures fall close to the top right intersection when the painting is divided into thirds. Monet deliberately guides your eye through the scene, letting it move naturally around the composition. Now look what happens when the horizon and figures are placed dead center. All the magic disappears. The viewer's eye stops moving around the piece and it just stays in the middle of the painting, resulting in a static composition that will not hold the viewer's attention for very long. So yes, it's important to understand the rule and then break it intentionally when it serves your purpose. Here's a great example of bending the rules from Edgar Degas. When we look at his painting Place de la Concorde, we can see that the horizon line is well above the top third. And while the tall figure on the right is aligned with the right vertical line, he's looking out of the painting, breaking the next rule we'll talk about, the rule of space. But yes, it still works. Why? Because the two girls' gazes draw us back into the composition. Our eyes follow their gaze along the back of the dog, up the arm of the man on the left, and back again. And we repeat this over and over. This is such a great example of movement, rhythm, and a successful composition despite breaking the rule of thirds. Let's see what happens if we remove those smaller figures. The composition suddenly falls flat. Our eye follows the main figure's gaze right out of the painting and doesn't come back. This leads us to the rule of space. When an element in a painting, such as a person, animal, or object, is facing in a certain direction, it's more effective to give them space to look or move into. That way your viewer's eye will be guided into, not out of, the composition. Let's take a look at Andrew Wyeth's Christina's World. See how effective all that open space is to the right? Now, if we crop it so the figure is facing out of the picture frame, the composition loses its impact. The same goes for moving subjects, as seen in these two Degas paintings, Horses in the Rain and Jockeys and Horses. Which one feels more effective to you? The one where the horses are moving into the open space, right? When they're moving out of frame, your eye just stops because it has nowhere to go. But when there's space ahead, your eye moves with them and the painting feels alive. The movement works and the composition is a success. Next up, let's look at the rule of odds. This one's surprisingly simple. Compositions with an odd number of subjects tend to feel more natural and visually interesting. Why? Because the human brain loves to pair things up. When there's an even number, your brain just groups them easily and then your eye settles. But with an odd number, there's always one left over, and that keeps your eye moving around the composition as your brain tries to sort it out. Take Caillebotte's The Floor Scrapers. If that third figure on the left weren't there, your eye would just settle on the two main figures and stop. But with three, there's movement and balance. Now let's look at Chagall's Lovers over Paris. The three figures keep your eye dancing across the canvas as you try to make sense of their relationships. With just two figures, the eye would rest much faster after pairing them up, and the composition would lack that same visual rhythm. And finally, the golden rule, also known as the golden ratio or the golden mean. This one is a mathematical ratio, 1 to 1.618, which is found throughout nature. Artists and architects have used it for centuries to create visually harmonious designs. But here's my take. Unless you love math, don't overthink it. Because this ratio appears everywhere in nature, most artists already use it intuitively. To me, this one is more about trusting your instincts. If your composition feels balanced and natural, you're probably already applying it without realizing it. In fact, just for fun, I randomly pulled out one of my own paintings inspired by nature, and there it was, the golden ratio. So, enough said about that one. That wraps up the second of the compositional tools, the 4 rules. In the next episode, we'll dive into the next tool, armatures. You definitely don't want to miss that one. Each of these tools adds another layer of understanding, and the more you learn, the more effective your compositions will be. If you found this helpful, don't forget to hit like, subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments what stood out for you today. Thanks for watching.